Many thanks for telling us that, and lovely to see that you're tuned in. But let me introduce my guest. We introduced him. He had a stunning debut on Sunday Night Live, and he's going to be one of our regular panelists on this particular show, Ernest Opuni. Great to have you here.
Thanks ever so much for having me again.
Let me start off from you, Ernest. What do you make of the starting lineup?
It feels as though it's balanced, and that's the key thing. I mean, I think I'm a self-confessed huge fan of Hassan Wajan, so the minute he doesn't start, obviously I feel like we're having to work twice as hard. I'd love to see him in the starting lineup. It's good to know he's fit enough to be on the bench, so we'll take it from there. I think certainly with him going with the three at the back, as we suspected he might do, and having clearly identified a couple of wing backs, I guess the key thing is making sure that the understanding of the role is about the amount of pace and work rate they're going to have to exercise if they're going to actually have that dual role, be it backwards and forwards. I think the guys at the back are going to have to be comfortable on the ball. I think we're going to have to make sure that we stay behind the ball, because I think one of the big things about Senegal, for me, that concerns me, is that they are almost embarrassed by the number of riches they have in an attacking sense. So I expect us to really have to be on our game. Very quickly, I'll say that I like what's happened up front. I think we've spoken about this previously. Andre Ayew is ideal, I think, for playing that role just off the actual main striker and linking up with the rest of the midfield. I'm really keen to see how Christian Etre gets on today as well. Hopefully he'll have enough space to express himself and show us what he can do.
Yeah, and Vero?
My biggest concern in this lineup is the level of inexperience in the team.
The question is, if you look at the squad, Abuka Adama has spoken about it. If you look at the squad, do you have the people to provide for him?
Absolutely ginormous, huge miss is Asamoah not being available. That's
Asamoah.
Because he's the one person you almost think there's a bit of a two-person symphony going with them, a bit of understanding. You still remember the cross against Portugal?
Yes.
That kind of thing isn't something you can find in a squad too easily. I guess it depends on how things are actually laid out. I mean, we're going to have to accept, irrespective of what has ever been said about Hassan Wajan, that if he's not actually punching his way to the front for us, we're probably about half the attacking force we're likely to be. He doesn't always depend upon a supply. It helps if he gets it. But he's able to kind of drop and actually link up play himself. I've always felt he was one of the best players we actually had in terms of spatial awareness and being able to control immediate space and linking up.
You're based in the UK, fine.
Yeah.
What's the feel? What's the mood like within the Guardian community there?
I think we're probably getting over what happened in Brazil. But a lot of people in the UK probably had a really chastening experience when, for the first time, there was a focus on the Ghana game on the back of a fantastic performance against Germany, and then it became this running joke about flights across the Atlantic and apparently cash and all this sort of stuff. I'm not quite sure that we've entirely put that behind us. I don't know how much people have focused upon actually a quite successful qualifying campaign and the fact that there's a big tournament coming up. I think it's time for the talking to happen on the pitch. This is the opportunity now. And it's very much about looking forward and ensuring that the very best that can be done actually is done. So it's about a commitment, full speed ahead. Let's talk football for a change.
This thing about reverting in the formation, because we're hearing from very good sources. Avram Grant said he does not think that we have the personnel. That's why he's changed to 3-5-2. And this morning, our own friend Carl Tufo has been quoted as saying he does not think we have the personnel for the 3-5-2. So in this sense, what exactly are we up to?
Very good question. What are we up to? 3-5-2, 3-4-1-1, depending on how you on how it happened on the day. It seemed to work for the first half because Senegal struggled to break us down. They ended up having to pile it in from long. They couldn't really actually get a direct route past us, and that was partly because the midfield was functioning. In a long-winded way, what I'm saying is the problem we ran into against Senegal, as much with the system and the fact I thought we got distracted by making it work, it was almost too ponderous thinking about how to make it work. We lost the dynamism between that phase of play and linking into our strength, which is actually our midfield. We then ran out of legs in the midfield, as a result of which the new strong defence was then exposed by a Senegal team that could actually run right through the midfield So in the end, the defensive system didn't last the full 90 minutes. So there's an argument there for saying, do we go with what we know, which is a bit of fragility? So the reason he's gone for that is because we've not been fantastic at actually keeping goals out, but do that at the expense of still maintaining some of our attacking thrust so that we can be at the races in a match which, let's face it, we really need to go out to try and win. So perhaps 4-4-2 works for that reason, but just means we're going to have to really hope we don't end up leaking something early, because then that derails the whole lot. Key thing for me, though, is some of them are going to have to figure out what happens in that last 20 minutes. Because if you broke that match down, we lost it in the last 20 minutes. It was down to the fact that our midfield, for some reason, just actually lost all of its engine, and that's where it's got to maintain it. If that happens again tomorrow, I don't need to say it, we will be coming home.
And on a rather simplistic view, others have said that Jan's absence affected us badly against Senegal. Could you? Now, he's been past fit. Well, I've been told by my producer we've been given some extra time, but we'll go for a commercial break. When we come back, Kojo will answer that particular question, and so
said no, and that was why it was cancelled. In all cases, you can see Ibrahim Sanidar, who is the director of communications at the FA. The communication lines are not happening. In fact, everybody seems to be singing from a different hymn sheet or song sheet. Question: what on earth is going on? Ernest?
This is a bit of a recurring theme. I mean, the only consistent communication is the communication I think that we're doing about this, which is suggesting that the communication should be a bit better aligned, just understanding precisely the source of stories, understanding the impact of disjointed communication, because what you do is you set hairs running. Once the news is out there or a story is out there, it's twice as difficult to bring it back in. If you haven't got the right thing to say, I'd suggest you hang fire till you know that you have, because it just kind of, it occupies a space in which we should be focusing on the real interesting and important stuff. And once you get a story out there before it should be out there, you're then having to try and draw it back in. I'm not sure how much of a good use of energy that is. And the perception is reality, somebody says. So then you have to deal with exactly when the perception goes wrong, and it just feels like we should be focusing on other things, and we can't.
let me start off from you.
It's really quite interesting when just having a look back at what's happened with Zambia. You're right. If you look at the players that are likely to make a noise for them, it's probably players that we're familiar with. So there's a range of the old names. That being said, they're in a bit of a middle ground, I think, where they probably held on to the vestiges of the 2012 team almost for too long, all the way through to the qualifications for the World Cup in 2014. That didn't happen. And then it feels like they've gone over the edge of a cliff with the amount of change that happened. And I think we're having a bit of a chat, weren't we, at the beginning? I think when you appoint Janza, I think it was August, at the time he had like a 3-month contract, so it was till November or whatever it was. You had an influx of some new players. You hadn't kept all the other ones. No wonder they started in such a difficult fashion. I think there was 2 draws and a loss. And at one point in October, they wouldn't have probably made their way through. I mean, they did well to win the last 3 games, including actually in the head-to-head with Cape Verde. But I think there's a bit of instability that could undermine them. I mean, I think their manager's now got like a rolling contract. I'm not sure what the frequency of that actually is. There's a lot of question marks. I think they probably hung on to a winning team for too long.
And but they still have Rainford Calabar, Stopila Sunzu, their charismatic goalkeeper Kennedy Mwini still in the team. But of course, Christopher Katongo was soon seen as a bad influence, removed from the team. But it's a bit long in the tooth now anyway.
It is.
And some new talent have been brought in.
Yes. And it is, I think it's good for them to be flying under the radar. Because if you check during the qualifiers, in spite of their struggles, they managed to get a better goal aggregate than Cape Verde that topped the group.